What kind of little girl walks past every adorable puppy and chooses the scarred, silent dog everyone else feared? Why did he move, after weeks of ignoring every human, only for her? This isn't just a story about adoption. It's about a bond that defies fear, breaks rules, and might just change how you see loyalty forever. Subscribe now to witness the moment everything changed. The wind that day felt different. It didn't just rustle the orange leaves scattered along the sidewalk. It seemed to carry whispers, low and wandering, like stories half told. Ellie pulled her coat tighter, her little fingers digging into the sleeves as she walked beside her mother through the narrow gate of Pine Hollow Animal Rescue. She didn't say much. She rarely did, not when strangers were around. The shelter was quiet, except for the occasional bark echoing from behind the metal kennels. The air smelled faintly of damp fur and disinfectant, a mix of something tired and waiting. Ellie paused just past the threshold, her eyes scanning the dim hallway. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with tangled chestnut hair that seemed to have a personality of its own. Her left hand, slightly curved, the fingers shorter than most, rested inside her coat pocket. She kept it hidden instinctively. Her mother, Dana, walked ahead, her voice light and cheerful. Too cheerful. Let's find someone friendly, huh? Maybe a puppy, something small, soft. She glanced over her shoulder with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ellie didn't respond. They passed kennels lined with dogs bouncing and barking, paws tapping against the gates like hopeful little fists. Each face seemed to say, "Pick me." There were golden retrievers, beagles, a pair of shepherd mixes. Ellie barely looked at them. Something tugged her elsewhere. At the very end of the row, past a half-flickering light and an old mop bucket leaning against the wall, was a kennel not quite like the others. The sign on the gate was older, the name smudged, edges curled from time. Inside, a large dog lay coiled in the far corner, silent, unmoving. His coat was a deep ash gray, almost blue in the shadow. Scars laced across his shoulder and rib cage like lightning bolts frozen in fur. One of his ears was nicked. He didn't look up as they approached. Ellie stopped in front of the kennel, slowly sinking to a crouch. She didn't make a sound. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the dog raised his head, just barely, and looked at her. There was no wagging tail, no eager panting, no playful tilt. Just two amber eyes, weary and raw, watching. He looked like something that had seen the worst of the world and hadn't entirely made it back. Her mother caught up, her voice suddenly tight. "Ellie, no, not this one." A man wearing a shelter vest appeared behind them. He was older, gray-stubbled, his name tag read Russell. His tone was cautious, practiced. "That one's Max. Big boy. Had a rough past. He's not a beginner dog. Honestly, I'm surprised he's still here." Dana moved a step closer to Ellie. "Honey, he looks dangerous. Why don't we go look at the puppies again?" Ellie didn't move. Her eyes never left Max. Russell shifted. "He's been returned 3 times. Last family said he growled at their son. Before that, well, there's a reason he's in the far kennel." Still, Ellie stayed. She reached into her coat pocket, slowly pulling out her curled hand, fingers short and stiff, and extended it palm up through the bars. Her hand trembled slightly. Max didn't flinch. He didn't growl. He just watched. Then, barely perceptible, his massive frame shifted. One paw, then another. The sound of his claws against concrete was soft, deliberate. He came forward, inch by inch, until his nose hovered just above Ellie's palm. He sniffed once, then pressed the bridge of his scarred muzzle into her tiny hand. Dana gasped. Russell froze. Ellie's lips curled into the smallest smile she'd made all day. "I want him," she whispered. "She's 7, Dana said quietly, her voice strained as she pulled Ellie gently by the elbow. "She doesn't understand what that kind of dog needs." Russell, the shelter worker, gave a subtle sigh and folded his arms, glancing down at the floor before returning his gaze to Max, who was still standing near the gate, muzzle pressed lightly to Ellie's palm. "No offense, ma'am, but we've had police here. Behaviorists. One guy came in with military canine training and even he walked away." His tone was calm, but his words carried weight. "This dog doesn't do well in homes. He shuts down, then snaps. You can't predict when. It's like something switches off and then comes back too late." Ellie said nothing. Her fingers slowly curled around Max's snout. His eyes, still fixed on her, blinked once. No growl, no warning, just stillness, like the moment right before a storm either breaks or passes. Dana crouched beside her daughter, lowering her voice as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind Ellie's ear. "Sweetheart, I know you feel something with him, but this isn't a fairy tale. You can't fix everyone. You remember what happened with that bird in the backyard? You were heartbroken." Ellie's voice came soft, almost inaudible. "This isn't a bird." Behind them, a second shelter employee had appeared, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and tired hands. Her name tag read Janine. She stepped closer to Dana, speaking low, away from Ellie's earshot. "I really need you to see something before you even consider this." She gestured toward the small staff office near the entrance. "Just 5 minutes." Dana hesitated, then gave Ellie one last glance. "Don't move from here," she said softly. Ellie nodded without looking back. Max hadn't moved. He seemed rooted, as if any shift in his body might shatter the moment between them. In the office, Janine laid down a file folder thicker than most. It was marked with a red sticker, "Special Risk." She opened it slowly. "Max was part of a wildfire rescue unit," she said. "Specialized canine unit out west. Saved 3 people during his first year. Trained on scent tracking, smoke environments, and human shielding. Textbook good dog. Until he wasn't." Dana's brow furrowed as she flipped through reports. Incident write-ups, assessments, blurry photos. What happened? "There was a cabin collapse," Janine said. 2 children inside. One handler was calling Max from the side entrance while another team approached from the rear. Max froze, then turned. He broke protocol, ran straight through a collapsing support beam. Got one kid out, but something went wrong. He bit the handler, trying to stop him. Deep punctures. That handler never came back. Dana blinked, processing. Janine continued, her voice lower. "We think it was sensory overload. PTSD maybe. But since then he reacts to sudden movement, loud voices, hands reaching too fast. He doesn't lash out every time, but when he does, it's bad. And no warning signs, just boom." The room felt colder suddenly. Outside the window, Dana could see Ellie still crouched beside the kennel. Max was now lying down, his head in her lap, his tail giving a small, uncertain thump against the concrete floor. Janine added, "We've considered euthanasia twice. Only thing that saved him was lack of space at other shelters. He's running out of chances." Dana stood still, her hand on the file, her heart heavier than it had been in months. She thought of Ellie at school, her quiet, guarded nature. The way she'd stopped playing tag last year because a boy called her broken. The drawings she made at night of wolves and mountains, always watching from afar. And now this dog that no one else wanted, a shadow of a hero now deemed dangerous. Back in the kennel hallway, Russell had crouched beside Ellie. "You know, kid," he said gently, "Max hasn't let anyone touch him in weeks, not even me. I bring him food, water, clean up his space. He always turns away. But he didn't turn from you." Ellie looked up, her voice as soft as a breeze. "He's not scared of me." Russell smiled faintly, something fragile in his eyes. "Maybe that's the first time he isn't." The office felt colder than it should have. Dana sat stiffly, a manila folder open in front of her. The pages inside were not meant for a parent. They were meant for professionals. Officers, behavioral scientists, decision makers, people who made yes or no calls on life and death for animals that had once been heroes. Janine tapped her nail on one particular page. "This is the one," she said. "This is what almost got him put down." Dana leaned in. The report was clinical, stripped of emotion. Incident 472. Smoke Ridge Fire Response. Handler: Lex T. Morgan Patel. Canine: Max, A14, Canine SRF. Status: breach of protocol, aggressive behavior toward human officer, failure to respond to voice commands. But the handwritten notes? Those told a different story. Max had been mid-deployment when the second story of a burning structure collapsed. One child had already been located. Another was believed to be trapped inside. The command was given to hold perimeter until structural engineers arrived, but Max, reacting to the child's scream inside, had surged forward. One handler tried to stop him. Max bit down, hard, broke skin, shattered a wrist, then disappeared into the smoke. He came out carrying a 5-year-old girl. The girl survived. The handler did not return to the field. Dana stared at the final line, written in red ink: exceptional instincts, uncontrollable under stress, unreliable in civilian environments. Janine sat down across from her. "We don't tell most people about this, especially not with kids around, but your daughter, she's not like most people." Dana's fingers trembled slightly as she closed the folder. Through the window, Ellie still sat by the kennel, Max's head resting against her legs like it belonged there. Dana whispered, "He saved a child, and he got punished for it." Janine nodded slowly. "That's what we thought too, but then came the second incident, 6 months after that." She opened another file. This one had photographs. A living room torn apart, scratches on a wall, a coffee table flipped, a 6-year-old boy crying in a police officer's arms. Dana's stomach clenched. The family says the boy startled Max while he was sleeping. No warning. Max lunged. Didn't bite him, but scared him bad enough to cause a panic attack. They returned him within 12 hours. Dana turned her gaze away. "But he didn't hurt him." "No," Janine said, "but he couldn't, and we couldn't take that risk again. He's been here ever since." Back in the hallway, Russell crouched beside Ellie, still watching the strange, almost sacred calm that had settled between girl and dog. "I've worked here 12 years, he said softly. "I've seen dogs come and go, some hurt, some angry, some just tired. I've never seen one sit that still with a child. Not Max." Ellie didn't respond. Her hand rested gently on Max's head. His eyes were half closed now, breathing slow, tail twitching faintly like he was dreaming, maybe for the first time in years. Dana walked out of the office, eyes heavy with everything she had read. She stopped a few feet behind Ellie. Russell looked up at her. "It's your call," he said simply. Ellie turned, her face calm but her voice firm. "I want him, Mom." Dana hesitated. "Ellie, there are things you don't know. He's been through things. He's hurt people, scared people. He doesn't always react like other dogs. He might even be dangerous." Ellie looked down at her own hand, the one people stared at, the one kids at school called weird or scary. Then she looked at Max. "I know," she said. "I'm not scared." Janine stepped forward. "If I may, Mrs. Rivers, most kids come here looking for someone perfect. Your daughter, she saw someone broken and chose him anyway." Max opened one eye. Ellie smiled. "We're kind of the same, I think." Anna looked at her daughter, at the dog, at the files still burning holes in her memory, and for a moment, she didn't see a risk. She saw a chance for both of them. The silence in the hallway stretched so long it began to hum like background noise. Russell stood back. Janine folded her arms, and Dana, holding the weight of 2 thick case files and a mother's trembling instinct, stared down at her daughter. Ellie remained kneeling by the kennel, Max's chin still resting on her thigh. The girl's eyes were dry, calm, but something behind them had shifted, hardened, just enough to hold. "Sweetheart," Dana said gently, "you have to understand. He's not like other dogs. He's had problems. People have been hurt." Ellie looked up slowly, her voice quiet but sure. "Because he was trying to help." "Ellie, you read the files, didn't you?" she asked, and for a moment she sounded much older than 7. "He went into fire. He saved a girl. He was scared and someone grabbed him, and he didn't know what to do. That doesn't make him a monster. It makes him confused." Janine and Russell exchanged a look, one part admiration, one part disbelief. Dana crouched down beside her daughter, putting a hand on her small back. "I know what you're feeling, I really do. You're kind, you see things other people miss. But honey, that's not always enough. What if one day Max gets scared again? What if you try to hug him and he panics? What if... Do you think that about me?" Ellie asked suddenly, and the question came like a soft punch to the heart. Dana blinked. "What?" Ellie slowly pulled her left hand from her coat. Her fingers, crooked, different, rested in her lap, fully visible. "I hit a kid once," she said. "He said my hand looked like something from a monster movie. So I threw my pencil box at him. They made me sit out of recess for a week." Dana's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Ellie looked at Max, then back at her mother. "You didn't stop loving me. You didn't send me back. You told me I made a mistake, but you still let me stay." Her voice didn't tremble. It was soft, steady, the kind of voice that didn't raise itself to be heard, but sank deep enough to stay remembered. "I'm not scared of him," Ellie whispered, "because I know what it feels like when people look at you and only see what they're afraid of." Russell exhaled slowly, almost reverently. Janine turned her face away for a moment, blinking harder than necessary. Dana sat back on her heels, caught somewhere between shame and awe. "Kids like her," Janine said quietly, "don't come in every day." Ellie turned to Russell. "Has he ever picked anyone?" Russell shook his head. "No. Max doesn't move for anyone, doesn't bark, doesn't wag, doesn't follow." Ellie reached down and scratched behind Max's scarred ear. "He picked me." For a long moment, Dana said nothing. Then she stood and walked to the office, her steps slow, deliberate. She returned a few minutes later, holding the adoption application in her hand. She crouched beside Ellie again, holding out a pen. "Then we pick him too," she said, voice low. Ellie took the pen, her grip awkward from the way her fingers curled, but she wrote anyway. Her name, big, careful letters. The paper trembled in her lap, but her hands were steady. Max stirred beside her. For the first time since she'd arrived, he let out a low breath. Not a growl, not a whine, just the sound of something exhaling after years of holding back. Dana watched them, and for the first time that day, she wasn't afraid. The paperwork wasn't even dry when it happened. Russell was in the back office finishing the last adoption processing forms, and Janine was organizing Max's few belongings into a small cardboard box. An old tennis ball with one side chewed flat, a tattered blanket that smelled like fear and bleach, and a note from the last family that had returned him, too unstable for kids. Sorry. In the hallway, Dana was helping Ellie zip up her coat, her fingers fumbling a little, the air thick with something fragile and unfinished. Max stood nearby, calm but alert, like he knew something had shifted, but didn't dare move too quickly. His leash dangled from Dana's hand, soft leather against her knuckles. And then it happened. A crash, sudden, violent. A metal food bowl flew across the corridor and clanged hard against the floor, spinning like a coin before settling. A large shepherd mix from the next kennel over had somehow burst free. Its gate hadn't latched properly after the morning clean. The dog bolted, panicked, lunging toward the hallway in a frenzy of limbs and barks, eyes wide, tail low. Ellie turned just as the shepherd slipped around the corner, skidding across the tiles. Her boots slid out from under her. She screamed, a sharp, startled sound, and hit the ground with a thud. Dana shouted her name, reaching instinctively, but it was too late. Max moved. In one fluid motion, his muscles coiled and launched. He stepped over Ellie, body low, positioning himself between her and the incoming dog. No barking, no growling, just a stance, protective, solid, his weight braced like a wall. The shepherd mix slowed, confused by the sudden blockade. Its barks turned unsure. Janine came running, a leash in hand, Russell close behind. The chaos compressed into seconds, but every sound rang in Dana's ears like an alarm. "Max!" she cried, frozen. But Max didn't attack. He didn't snap, didn't lunge. He simply held his ground, ears pinned, tail low but steady. The shepherd whined, lowered its head, and skittered away as Janine looped the leash over its neck and pulled it back toward its kennel, muttering something about faulty latches and near heart attacks. When the noise cleared, Max turned his head slightly and looked down. Ellie was curled under him, her hands shielding her face, shaking. Max gently nudged her shoulder with his nose. She peeked out. Her cheeks were wet with tears, but she smiled, wide and full. "You stayed," she whispered. Max wagged his tail once, just once, but that was all it took. Dana was already beside them, kneeling down, her hands moving over Ellie, checking for bruises. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," Ellie said, voice quivering, eyes never leaving Max. Janine looked over, her face pale. He didn't react. I thought he'd snap, but... He held back. Russell stood speechless, watching Max nuzzle Ellie's shoulder like he was making sure she was real. "No signs of aggression," Janine murmured, stunned. "Just protection." Dana sat back slowly, heart still hammering in her chest. "He didn't even hesitate." Ellie nodded, her tiny hands wrapping around Max's neck. "I knew he wouldn't." Max licked her cheek once, soft and slow. That moment, girl and dog huddled in the middle of a dim shelter hallway, surrounded by fear and hope, felt suspended in amber. And something changed in the room. It wasn't just about second chances anymore. It was about trust earned in the most terrifying second of a life. Dana stood up and looked at Janine. "We're still taking him home." Janine exhaled, a kind of exhale that felt like letting go of years of hesitation. "Good. He needs someone who believes in him more than a file ever could." The shelter had fallen into a hushed calm, like the building itself was holding its breath. Russell returned the frightened shepherd to its kennel with hands that shook slightly, muttering to himself about locks and heart palpitations. Janine knelt nearby, watching Ellie and Max as if she was seeing a ghost story rewrite itself in real time. Dana stood quietly off to the side, her arms crossed, still processing what she'd witnessed. Then a voice came from behind them, gravelly and low. I knew he wasn't gone. Everyone turned. At the far end of the hall stood a thin older man in a faded brown jacket, his shelter ID swinging slightly on a frayed lanyard. His name was George, though most people just called him the night watchman. He was the one who mopped the floors after closing, fed the dogs late, locked up long after the rest had gone home. Most didn't pay him much mind. He walked slowly toward them, stopping beside Max. The dog turned his head, eyes narrowing in quiet recognition. George crouched, placing a wrinkled hand on Max's head. He used to lie awake all night. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't bark, just stared at the door like he was waiting for something to come back and never did. Dana watched as George spoke, his voice low, eyes never leaving Max. People think dogs snap for no reason, that they're born bad or broken, but this one, he saw things that hurt him, and he didn't forget them. Russell furrowed his brow. "You saw him change?" "I saw him fight it," George replied. There was a pit bull brought in last winter, dying from exposure, could barely stand. Max wouldn't leave the side of her kennel, not once. For 3 nights straight, he sat outside that cage. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, just stayed. The second she passed, he laid down right there in the hallway, wouldn't move for hours. Janine looked down, silent. Dana's throat tightened. George continued. Another night we had a break-in. Some teens messing around, broke a window, tried to run through the dog wing for kicks. Max barked once, just once, and every dog went quiet, not scared, just listening. Like they trusted him more than us. He looked up at Dana. I don't care what's on his file. I know what I saw, and I saw a dog who didn't give up on others even after the world gave up on him. Max remained still beside George, tail sweeping the floor once, twice. Ellie, still seated, reached out and touched the dog's back. He's not broken, she said. He's just been waiting for someone who understands. George smiled, a small, crooked thing, and stood back up. Then maybe he's waited long enough. Janine stepped forward, voice softer than usual. I think we all made our decisions about Max a long time ago, based on fear, on files. But files don't show what we saw today. Dana glanced at the form still folded in her coat pocket. It's funny, she said, almost to herself. I came in here wanting something safe, something easy. She looked at Max. But maybe what we needed was something real. There were no objections, no counter-arguments, just the quiet, warm stillness of a decision finally made. George patted Max once more. Good luck, big guy. Max didn't move, but his gaze followed Ellie as she stood, brushing off her coat. She held his leash gently, not pulling, just holding. And Max, for the first time in a long while, rose to follow. The air outside smelled like wet leaves and coming rain. The sun had dipped behind the horizon, leaving a soft gray light stretching across the parking lot. Dana opened the back door of their SUV, folding down the seats so there would be room. She laid an old quilt across the floor. Ellie's favorite, the one with the stitched stars and moon that used to hang over her bed. Max stood still on the concrete, leash in Ellie's hand, unsure of the space in front of him. Russell gave the leash a gentle tap. Go on, bud, you're not a guest anymore. Max hesitated for half a breath, then stepped forward. His paws made no sound on the fabric, but when he curled himself onto the quilt, something in his body language changed. His shoulders sank, his tail rested low, not tucked. He didn't pant, he just breathed, like a soldier allowed to sit down for the first time in years. Ellie climbed in beside him, cross-legged, facing him. You're gonna like home, she whispered. There's a porch with warm sun in the afternoon, and my room smells like cinnamon. We have snacks. Dana closed the hatch gently and walked around to the front seat. As she slid in and started the car, she looked in the rearview mirror. Max's face was half in shadow, half in glow from the parking lights. His eyes weren't anxious. They were watching Ellie. The road home was quiet. Ellie rested her head on Max's side, her fingers drawing lazy circles in his fur. He didn't move. The only sound was the low hum of tires against pavement and the occasional flick of the turn signal. Max closed his eyes. Not the light sleep of survival, but something deeper. When they arrived, Dana opened the door and paused. It was a simple house. Nothing fancy. A white fence. A wind chime hanging by the porch that barely rang anymore. The kind of place that held years in the carpet and stories in the kitchen tiles. She turned to Ellie. Do you want to show him around? Ellie nodded, then whispered something to Max that no one else heard. She stepped out first, leash still in hand, and Max followed, stepping slowly onto the driveway like it might vanish beneath him. The porch creaked. The screen door gave its usual stubborn squeak. Ellie led him through the entryway and into the living room where the smell of home clung to every surface. Books, lemonwood polish, the faintest trace of fireplace smoke. Max sniffed cautiously, ears low but not pinned. He paused at the edge of the rug, then sat. Just like that. Dana watched from the kitchen archway. "He chose his spot," she said softly. Ellie beamed. "That's the thinking rug. I sit there when I draw." Max looked up, head tilted slightly. Ellie walked into her room, came back a moment later with something in her arms, a folded red bandana. She knelt beside Max and tied it gently around his neck. It was worn and a little faded, but she handled it like it was made of silk. "Every hero needs a cape," she said. Dana leaned against the wall, one hand over her heart. "You're sure about the name?" Ellie nodded. "Max fits. It sounds strong, like someone who keeps going even when it's hard." Dana whispered, "Max it is." Max laid his head on his paws. His tail thumped twice against the rug. That night, Ellie fell asleep on the couch. Max curled beside her like a warm shadow. Dana covered them both with a blanket and turned off the lights. She stood for a moment longer, watching the pair through the soft glow of the hallway, then whispered to herself, "I didn't rescue a dog today. I watched my daughter save someone the world gave up on. And maybe, just maybe, he was saving her too." Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting golden lines across the living room rug. Max was already awake, lying in his chosen spot, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Ellie, still curled beneath the blanket beside him, slept with one hand resting lightly on his side. Her fingers twitched now and then, as if chasing something in a dream. Dana stood quietly in the doorway with a mug of coffee, watching them like she didn't dare interrupt. She thought about the last 24 hours, about how she had come to the shelter expecting to bring home a puppy, something small, something safe, something predictable, and instead her daughter had seen something she hadn't, a bruised creature with a haunted past, wrapped in scars and silence, and somehow found a friend inside him. Max lifted his head, sensing her gaze. Their eyes met, hers tired, his calm. She nodded once. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't need to. Later that morning, Ellie gave Max a full tour of the house. Room by room, she pointed out important places. The kitchen, where snack magic happened. The laundry room, where socks mysteriously disappeared. The corner where the Christmas tree would go, even though it was still months away. When they reached her bedroom, she paused in the doorway. "This is where I read," she said, "and where I go when I feel like I don't belong anywhere." Max stepped inside, sniffing gently around her bookshelf, her art supplies, the corner where a stack of sketch pads leaned against the wall. Ellie opened one and showed him a drawing she'd made weeks ago, an enormous wolf with kind eyes standing beside a small girl with a crooked smile. "I didn't know who this was when I drew it," she said softly, "but I think it was you." Max sat beside her, no growl, no tension, just presence, just peace. Days passed like that, quietly. The kind of quiet that heals. Dana watched her daughter return to herself, bit by bit. Ellie spoke more at school, she drew more, she laughed louder, and every time she did, Max was never far behind, not as a guard, but as a shadow with a heartbeat. He had become something more than a pet. He had become a constant. One afternoon after school, Ellie sat on the porch steps, a notebook in her lap and Max's head on her knee. She was working on a story for class. The prompt had been simple: write about someone brave. She had written 3 pages already, not about a soldier or a firefighter, but about a dog with broken ears and a bigger heart than most people would ever understand. She read it aloud to Max, her voice lilting and bright. He didn't understand the words, not really, but he heard the tone, and that was enough. Inside, Dana found herself searching through old photo albums, looking for a space to place a new one. Max had only been with them for a week, but he already belonged in the story. He wasn't a chapter they'd planned for, but sometimes the chapters you don't expect are the ones that end up changing everything. That night, as she tucked Ellie into bed, Dana hesitated. "You know," she said, brushing hair from her daughter's eyes, "I used to think we were rescuing Max." "Max," Ellie smiled, already half asleep. "We didn't. He rescued me first." Outside, Max curled at the foot of her bed. His breathing was soft, steady, safe. And as the wind picked up beyond the window, brushing leaves against the glass like a lullaby, a quiet promise echoed in the stillness. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning.